Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Williamson. I'm the publisher of Fierce Pharma, and I'm thrilled to be with you all here today as we kick off Digital Pharma Innovation Week. Now, in normal times, we'd be in Philadelphia this week at Digital Pharma East, and while we're disappointed to not be seeing you all in person, our team has put together a great event for you to enjoy this week. We're really excited about our keynote sessions and panel discussions, which will take place every day this week in the mornings. We have keynotes from Vlad Korik at Biohaven, Mark Reisenauer at Astellas Pharma, Seema Kumar from Johnson & Johnson, and we have a great session with Claire Mulhern from Merck, who's going to be talking to Katie Kirk on Thursday morning. Now, in the afternoons, we're taking a deeper dive into key topics, and we'll start with the HCP-focused sessions this afternoon. We'll be covering patient solutions, data and analytics, omnichannel engagement, and media strategy on the other afternoons. And as a reminder, all of the content will be available on demand for 6 months after the show. And I want to take this time to say a big thank you to all of our speakers who've taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us this week. Thank you all. We're very excited about giving out the Pharma Marketing Awards this week. Every day at 12:05 p.m., we'll be celebrating the finalists and winners of our awards programs. So you can tune in today to see who wins in the Professional Marketing and Medical Conference or Event Marketing campaigns. And of course, I'd like to give another huge thanks to all of our partners and sponsors. It's because of them that we can offer you free access to all of this content. So please do check out the resources that they've provided. You can find insights, case studies, white papers, videos at our partner booths and our partner content hub. And this will also be available to you for 6 months. So although we cannot meet face-to-face, we wanted to give you several different ways to connect with each other during the week. We encourage you to use the chat function during our sessions. You can visit our networking lounge to discuss topics with other attendees. And you can also have private one-to-one or group text chats. We have face-to-face networking in the booths. Both one-to-one and group video chats are available in many booths, and you can also text chat with our partners. Now, every afternoon during the networking breaks, we're going to have Zoom rooms set up where you can join topic-based discussions and video chat to other attendees. We also have some great prizes to give away this week, and you can earn points for engagement with each other in our content sessions, so we hope that you'll play along. I have a few housekeeping notes for you, and I also want to note we've added a new tab with FAQs on it, so you can refer to that tab as well. If you're having trouble with your connection or if you're noticing a lag, try refreshing your browser. If you can't hear, make sure that your speakers are on and your volume is up. There's no dial-in for the series. If you have any other issues, please review the help page on the lobby navigation bar. I also have a few tips and tricks for you while navigating the console. If you have questions for speakers, please submit them in the Q&A tab next to the chat on the left side of your screen. We encourage you to utilize the chat function to discuss the sessions in real time with other attendees. If you want more information, presentations will be found in the presentations area under the theater tab. And we want you to get involved. We want you to enjoy the networking portion of the conference. So you can find out about our Zoom rooms and other networking opportunities in the theater or in the networking tab on the lobby navigation bar. If you have time constraints or if you missed an important part of a session, don't worry, the sessions will be available on demand for up to 6 months. You can simply log in using your access link to view at your leisure. I think that's everything from me now. And now I'm really excited to introduce our first keynote session of the week. My colleague Beth Bullock is senior editor at Fierce Pharma, and she's responsible for all of our pharma marketing coverage. She'll be hosting this fireside chat with Judy Stewart, senior vice president and head of U.S. vaccines at GSK. Welcome, Beth and Judy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So welcome to the opening day of Digital Pharma Innovation. I'm Beth Snyder-Bulick, and I'm a senior editor at Fierce Pharma. So we're going to kick off the conference talking about vaccines, which is a hot topic, of course, but we're actually not talking about COVID-19 vaccines. This morning, we're talking to Judy Stewart, who's the senior vice president of vaccines at GlaxoSmithKline in the United States. Today, we're going to talk about adult vaccines and GSK's new awareness campaign spotlighting them. Brought to you by Vaccines, the campaign was created to help raise awareness and increase vaccination rates among adults. With the pandemic causing a big drop in well visits and routine vaccinations, GSK took the initiative to launch its first ever general vaccine awareness campaign. Welcome, Judy, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the rest of the week as well.
Thank you. So before we get into the campaign, let's talk a little bit about how you got started in life sciences and how you came to be heading vaccines at GSK in the United States.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I mean, some days it feels like it's a blink of an eye, but I've actually been in the industry for well over 20 years. I started my career at a very small boutique advertising agency, and the clients that I was responsible for were in the healthcare industry, and that was kind of my entry point into the industry, and I've stayed ever since. So I've spent some time in market research and analytics at the time it was IMS, now it's IQVIA. Went to a biotech company and learned all things startup and launch, and then landed at GSK and have had the pleasure and the opportunity to work in a lot of different therapeutic areas, different markets, so US as well as Europe, and now have the pleasure and the awesome responsibility of leading the vaccines business in the US for GSK, and it's a really exciting place and lots of growth and important to the entire enterprise. So it's an important piece of our business.
Great, thank you. So obviously with the pandemic going, vaccines are on everyone's minds, but kind of the vaccines that get forgotten are the traditional ones that help people stay healthy that we've used for years. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of the COVID-19 on traditional vaccines and especially on adult vaccinations?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. I mean, I think if you're in the industry, you've seen not just with vaccines, but with all preventative care, a massive decline in the use of services, of testing, anything to do with prevention, I think took a back seat, and rightfully so during a pandemic. And so we did see a massive decline in vaccinations, particularly with adults. If you look at the peak of that kind of spring, April, May time period when the pandemic was at its highest, you saw a decline of about 60% in the demand for adult vaccination. I think those numbers are definitely startling, although probably not surprising to many of you who have been looking at the data. I think that adults in particular are a very difficult group to have habit changes happen. And so traditionally we see that adult vaccination is quite low in the United States. Less than half of adults are currently getting the recommended vaccines, which is a concern, obviously, and part of the reason why we chose to launch the campaign when we did in August.
So yes, let's talk about that campaign. So it's called Brought to You by Vaccines. It's a first ever general vaccination campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that and the thinking behind it, why you decided to do it?
Sure. So it's what we call an unbranded. So it's not pointing to a specific vaccine brand. It's not even pointing to a specific therapeutic area or disease. It's really a campaign that tries to educate those who are 50 years older and older. We call them early and older adults. And we really want to educate and make them aware not only of what's recommended, but also that it's really important to get vaccinated, particularly as you age, because your immune system starts to wane, and it's important that you stay protected. And so it's really an educational campaign, but one of the things that we knew we needed to do in educating was to try to kind of hit the right people at the right time in the right place. And I know we talk a lot about that when we're using digital, that it's really critical to hit the right people with your message. And so we created these micro targets. So we broke out the 50 population, and we got micro segments based on some IQVIA medical data as well as some demographic data that we leveraged, and found very specific targets of people that we knew were more likely to get vaccinated. And then we started communicating with them in time periods when they were searching for health information online, and made sure that the messaging was when they were ready to receive it, right? When they were open to hearing about health and it was contextualized. And I think we're excited about the campaign. We're starting to see really good signs, early results. It's also a campaign that we sponsored with the AAFP. So it's the American Academy of Family Physicians. We thought it was really important in that education message to partner with a really credible source, and the AAFP is that.
And you mentioned the digital aspect of it. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what the microsites were and how you maybe give an example or how you did that targeting?
Sure. So we use the medical data, and then we also use demographic data, and we broke out that population because 50 plus is a very broad group. And so we broke that out into those that are seeking health care. We looked at micro segments and then found where they go online, found what they use digitally. One of the interesting things, I don't know if this is a sad state of our society or not, but we consume a tremendous amount of digital, and the 50 plus population, most of our segments are utilizing Facebook and Pandora like by leaps and bounds, way more than the average person. And so those are two areas that we definitely over leveraged our educational messaging for. If you look at Pandora, I mean, just to put it into context, Pandora is a streaming music service. It's gone up 42% since the same time last year, and that's largely driven by people in the pandemic wanting to stay at home, not wanting to be, out as much, wanting to be socially distant. They're consuming a lot online, and I think that's something great for the digital space. I don't know if that's so good for all of us because I think it can be quite isolating to spend that much time online by yourself. But Pandora is definitely a streaming service that we're leveraging a lot. The average 50 and older person is consuming about 2 hours a day of music, so online. So yeah, just to put that into context, when I say we're consuming a lot, it really is quite amazing. Yeah, quite amazing.
That's interesting. And so, why focus on older adults? GSK makes vaccinations for everyone.
We
why
do.
why that particular population right now? I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do. We have a portfolio of vaccines that runs the lifespan, right? So from infants, children, adolescent, adults, older adults. But we really chose to focus on older adults because of the immunization rates, both before COVID, as I mentioned, but also during COVID. And we saw that the biggest gap in healthcare right now, as it applies to immunizations and vaccines, is in that older adult population. So we've got, we think we've got ourselves somewhat covered on the pediatric and adolescent side of the house. The CDC is obviously really pushing the message of making sure that children are caught up. I think the school systems also help do that in most states. And so that's part of the reason why we chose to focus on adults, because we really believe that that's where the health gap exists. And those are also the population that's most at risk for vaccine preventable diseases. So that's why we chose that population. It's a harder one to tackle, but I think the one that needs it the most.
Yeah, right. Of course. And you said you're starting to get some feedback and some results. Can you talk a little bit about those? Like what kind of maybe even anecdotal feedback are you getting? And then have you been talking to physicians and the group that you're working with? What are they seeing as far as adult vaccinations?
Yeah. So, I should say I really do applaud anyone in the healthcare space right now who's on the front line and not only dealing with the pandemic, but also trying to get health services back to a normal pace. And both healthcare professionals and pharmacists play a big role in vaccination. And they've done quite a bit to try to create safe environments where people can get vaccinated. And I think, I really applaud the efforts there. You've seen a lot of creativity in the marketplace right now, not only dealing with COVID and that disease, but also other diseases. I think from a results perspective on our campaign, we are seeing a lot of people move to our website. So as part of the educational effort, we provide more information on our website, brought to you by vaccines.com. And so we've seen quite a bit of activity there. We also have done some satellite media tours with the AAFP, as well as with some patient advocates to try to help explain the importance of vaccines, why they're so important, especially in a time like now, where we don't want to overburden the healthcare system. And so making sure that we're vaccinated. It is flu season, so getting your flu shot's important. And I think that we're starting to see really nice trajectories in people getting vaccinated, getting caught up, being protected for influenza. So I think we're really pleased by the early signs of the campaign.
Okay. And you mentioned pharmacies and pharmacists in there. Do you how do you speak to them, or have you seen what kind of I guess participation or conversations have you had with them?
Yeah, I mean, so they're a key customer for us. So we have ongoing conversations throughout the year, depending on what season we're in. And so pharmacists play a critical role for older adults, especially those that are 65 and above. They will typically go to the doctor first, but then get vaccinated in the retail setting. And so making sure that people are aware that that can happen, that they're comfortable with it, that they feel safe going into those environments. We've been having ongoing conversations with a lot of the retailers around not only how we can help and our efforts to help activate consumers and get them into the pharmacy setting, but also making sure that they feel comfortable doing that. And so I think that's a big initiative for the retailers. You're starting to see creativity around how they're social distancing in those environments, utilizing, at least for now, utilizing outdoor space. I think in the winter months that might be a little bit more tricky, but and definitely trying to keep the well and the sick populations separated so that you're not creating additional risk that's unnecessary when people go in for preventative vaccination.
And so, and you did mention the winter months coming up, and so I know the campaign is going to continue, right? So
Yeah.
pushing forward with the same message, or changing the messaging a little bit, or are you going forward?
It's a good question. I mean, I think we've been running it since August, and we're not completely through the initial phase of it. So I think once we get kind of the results and see what the dynamics were with our earned media, our social media, as well as our TV campaign, we'll kind of gather together as a group and decide whether or not we want to change out the messaging, tweak the messaging. I mean, the good news about digital is that you can do that in pretty quick. You can have, a very ever-changing messaging and segmenting depending on what you see work and not work. And I think the winter months will be, I think, a challenge just to get people out. You're starting to see, unfortunately, the COVID numbers climb again. You see that in Europe. You're definitely seeing it here in the U.S. And so I think, we're trying to create campaigns right now, not just for this campaign, but for all of our campaigns that are quite flexible and can change as our environment changes and what we're dealing with regards to the pandemic changes. So, that's the beauty of digital, I guess, and one of the reasons why we're leveraging it right now.
That's a really good point, too, that need to be flexible, especially now, and the use of digital. I know this campaign has a TV component to it as well. Is it mostly to drive to digital for awareness? How do you view that part of it?
So the call to action in our TV specifically, our broad TV. So we're using different types of commercials. Some are online, but the broad TV traditional campaign, we're actually driving the call to action to your pharmacist or to your healthcare provider. So we want them to go seek treatment. That unfortunately we have not figured out a way to virtually vaccinate people yet. So you have to go somewhere to get vaccinated.
Yes, that makes sense, of course. So all of this vaccine talk, obviously everybody's talking about a COVID-19 vaccine. What do you think is the bigger impact going to be on vaccinations? How is it going to change or evolve?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know if I know the answer to that. I mean, there are a few things that are very encouraging. So we do see in the data, we ran a Harris poll, and you do see people definitely increasing their understanding and knowledge of the importance of getting vaccinated. We hear that all the time in the news as it applies to the COVID vaccine and how hard people are working to bring vaccines to the market to help us try to get on the other side of this pandemic. But you also are starting to hear messaging and things in the media around the safety, right? So it can't just be something that works to protect us. It also has to be safe and not causing more harm. And I think that's a balance that we need to get right as we bring COVID vaccines to the marketplace. I think that the great thing about getting vaccinated with things that are already on the market is many of them have been around for years and they have a wealth of safety data as well as efficacy data. And so people can feel confident that the vaccines that exist now on the market are quite safe, and they work. So I think the best thing that we can do as adults is to try to get vaccinated with all of the recommended vaccines, because one of the things that we're doing is not only protecting ourselves and our communities, but we're also helping to alleviate the burden to the healthcare system as we see a spike in COVID. You know, us not going into the hospital for things like influenza helps relieve the pressure points in the system right now. And so I think it has, multiple benefits, actually.
Do you think there's an opportunity in general for sort of vaccines to get a better reputation? You mentioned the Harris poll. We've written a lot about how the pharma industry's reputation is getting better. Does this kind of help the reputation of vaccines? I know that's kind of a weird way to put it, but sort of how people feel about vaccines, I guess.
I mean, I hope so. I hope that the more that we talk about the benefits of vaccines and make people aware of the benefits of vaccines, and, we recognize, I hope as an industry that getting on the other side of this pandemic is going to be done with vaccines. That's one of the only ways to get there. And so I hope that people see the importance of it and the need for it. But I also think that people can be skeptical, and rightfully so, right? I mean, you want people to not just take things blindly. You want people to look at the data and to educate themselves and ask good questions of their healthcare providers to get comfortable that they're doing the right thing. And so I think that we have a job to do as an industry in educating people, but I recognize that if you're not as close to it as a lot of the people in the healthcare industry are, it can sometimes be a scary thing that they need to, seek more information. And so that's really probably the best thing that we can ask for, is that people educate themselves and go seek advice before they make a decision on vaccines.
And so that's an important part of your communications, to talk about that education and safety, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so when we on our website that I mentioned earlier, we do have information. We have a lot of places that you can go. The CDC is a great resource as well to get unbiased information and data, depending on how data savvy you are. Some people like to read a lot, and some people like to ask more questions of credible sources. And so the CDC is also another great place to get that information. But we are stressing the importance of what's recommended, so people are aware of that at a baseline, but also where they can go to get vaccinated, and make sure that they prevent vaccine preventable diseases with themselves as well as their family.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I guess we're getting a little close to time here, but so anything else, kind of going forward and looking, I mean, it's impossible, as you said, you don't have a crystal ball. It's impossible to see what's going to happen in the next couple of months. The pandemic is here definitely through the next few months. What do you see GSK's vaccine role in the next month to year?
So we've got a couple of different partnerships right now in the COVID space, both vaccines as well as treatment. And we actually, in our consumer health, also have a test, a COVID test. So we're kind of covering the gamut of COVID and trying to help wherever we can. We have an adjuvant that we're using for some of our older vaccines that we've made available to all of our partnerships. That will help, especially when we get to mass vaccination of trying to vaccinate the population. The adjuvant is paired with an antigen and helps to spare the antigen, so you're not using so much of it in every single dose, and therefore you can make more. And that, we think, is a critical strategy when we start talking about vaccinating millions and millions of people around the world. And so, Yeah, we're hoping to see something next year for sure. I think depending on what vaccines you're talking about and what manufacturers, the timing might look a little bit different. But I think first will come high risk populations and those in the front line. And then as we get further on into the year, you'll start looking at strategies to start vaccinating the wider populations, and adults will be critical in that as well. Those will probably be in the general pop. We'll start with adults, I believe. So so it's important.
So what kind of role do you think GSK will play? Where will you, in that rollout? There'll be a lot of things going on all at once.
Mm.
How will you handle communications then?
Yeah, so for the first wave of vaccines, the government has procured the vaccines that we think we need in the US. And so Operation Warp Speed, the CDC, the ACIP will all play a role, BARDA for sure. So a lot of government agencies are playing more of a role than they would in traditional vaccines, where that's an ongoing process. We know how to distribute and administer adult vaccines in other therapeutic areas. But for COVID, a lot of that is going to be managed by the government, especially in the beginning when you've got limited amounts. And so, we obviously are partnering with all of the government agencies to do our part, as is all the other vaccine manufacturers in the US. So we've all kind of come together with the help of BIO, which is an industry partner who pulls us all together so that we can have a cohesive strategy. But a lot still to be worked out, for sure.
We do still have another couple of minutes. I'm sorry, I lost track of time there. So one thing I didn't ask about the Brought to You by Vaccines campaign, you have another campaign going on around the shingles campaign specifically.
Yeah.
Can you just maybe take a minute to talk about shingles and Shingrix too? They're branded and unbranded campaigns going on.
Yeah, so we've got a few different things going on right now. I mean, that decline that I spoke about earlier during that kind of second quarter, April, May time period, when we were most of the country was in kind of a lockdown effort, and we saw a decline in adult vaccination. We also saw a decline in the adolescent space as well. And so we've got a few different campaigns running right now. We have a couple of campaigns, both a branded one for Shingrix, which is our shingles vaccine, and an unbranded that talks about the consequences of getting shingles. It's an unbranded but specific around herpes zoster or shingles. Both of those have been running since July, and they have digital components to them as well. So a lot of the things I spoke about for the Brought to You by Vaccines campaign is also happening for the shingles space. That's an important vaccination for older adults. And then we also have a campaign running targeting moms of adolescents. And we're speaking directly to the moms because they're usually the healthcare conductor for their family, especially their adolescents. And so that vaccine is specific to meningitis B. And that campaign, again, is unbranded. It just talks about the importance of getting fully vaccinated for meningitis, and specifically meningitis B. And so that typically is a vaccine where we see large vaccination happening right before people go back to school, especially in that kind of high school and college range. And unfortunately, because a lot of children are virtual and not going back face to face, we did see a decline in this back to school season around adolescents. And so we're hoping to generate that awareness and that education and that reminder of how important that is for the adolescent space as well.
Okay.
So lots going on.
Yeah, just a few things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Judy. Anything else? I don't want to leave you hanging there. Anything else to add?
No, I just thank you for the invite and for helping to kick off the meeting. The agenda looks great. I think, digital is a key part of our lives now more than ever before, not just for campaigns, but just for us to be able to communicate and feel connected. And I think, I think it's an important space to be in and to talk about. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about adult vaccinations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judy. Really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Take care and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was a great conversation. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Judy. Really nice job. I hope you all enjoyed our opening keynote. I want to thank you again for joining us this week, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.